LDL cholesterol and VLDL cholesterol have gotten a really bad rap. It is the number one fuel source for your heart. There's been lots of things that you guys have never heard about, by the way. LDL and VLDL cholesterol is the number one fuel source for your heart. You desperately need it. It will never plaque. It's never going to cause a heart attack. It's never going to cause any problems ever. So if you have high LDL, if you have high triglycerides, if you have that stuff, you're fine. Don't listen to your doctor. It's a lie that cholesterol is going to plaque. UCLA just did a study. Well, they say it did a while ago, showing that 75% of the people who died from a heart attack or a stroke caused by arterial plaquing in their study had good or normal cholesterol levels. The reason that everybody will tell you that LDL and VLDL cholesterol is causing your heart attacks is because they have statin drugs they're trying to sell you, not because they care about your health. If they cared about your health, they would do tests that look for plaque, called a calcium CT. So the calcium CT is one of the base ones. They've got some with dye. They've got some with dye with AI, which is really cool. But that's how you check for plaquing, is with a calcium CT. If your doctor has not offered you a calcium CT, but has offered you statin drugs, you don't have a healthcare provider, you have a drug salesman. Sorry, that's where you're at. I don't care if it's a cardiologist, primary care. If they said, hey, look, we're worried about your heart, we're going to do an echocardiogram, we're going to do a calcium CT, we're going to do a sleep study, you have a healthcare provider. If they say, hey, your LDL is high, we're going to give you a statin drug, you have a drug salesman. The amount of people who come in here and tell me that their joints hurt, they're tired all the time, they have no sex drive, they feel like trash because they're on a statin drug. And I go, well, what's your calcium CT say? And they go, I have no idea what you're talking about. I was like, what's your echocardiogram look like? They go, I have no idea what you're talking about. And so we do an echocardiogram, which is a video of your heart actually beating. I can see leaky valves. I can see if the ejection fraction, which is the amount of blood kicked out of the heart, is the accurate amount. I can see if your atrial, like everything that happens in your heart mechanically, I can see if it's okay. Does it leak? Does it work right? All that stuff I can see. Calcium CT is an x-ray of the chest that shows plaquing. So if we're worried about plaquing, why don't we look for plaquing? It's not a new test either. This thing's been around forever. Your doctors don't do it because they want to sell you statin drugs. And if your calcium CT comes back as 0, which means you have no plaquing in your arteries, they can't sell you statin drugs. That's why they don't offer them. They know about them. Your cardiologist 100% knows about them, but they don't offer them because they want to sell you statin drugs. They don't want to help your healthcare. Think of it this way. If you're on a statin drug every day for the rest of your life and it doesn't help because they don't really help, and then you have a heart attack, they get to make money off of you every single day. And then when you have your heart attack at the hospital, they get to make money off of you all the time. If we fix the problem, they don't get to make money off of you. The Western medicine model is management and treatment of disease, not eradication of disease, because they make money on the management and treatment. Management and treatment is every single day. And then when you finally have your issue, they treat it at the hospital. That's how they make their money. I make my money by preventing issues, fixing issues, and then helping you maintain your health. So it just depends. Do you want to spend money maintaining your health, or do you want to spend money managing a disease process and letting it get worse over time? That's really kind of how it goes. So look at it that way. The other thing about this is that when you get, if you're looking for plaquing on a blood test, you have to look for what's called oxidized LDL. Oxidized LDL is actually the type of LDL that will plaque. What happens is that we have reactive oxidative stress based off free radicals. And here's the fun thing: if you're younger, if you're 40-ish, between maybe 35 and 50, you might have heard the term free radical damage, oxidation, things like that, because it was big in the 90s, and then everybody quit talking about it. And the reason they quit talking about it was because there's no drugs that fix oxidation or free radical damage, only supplementation and nutrition, because it's a natural process and only natural things can fix natural processes. So they quit talking about it because they weren't going to make money off of it, and that's the actual problem. So that's why that really started dying down. So that's when I talk about reactive oxidative stress. When I talk about free radicals, that's actually the chemical process that's problematic. That's why NAC is so good. That's why nattokinase is so good. That's why, CoQ10 is so great. That's why hyperbaric oxygen is so fantastic. That's why we do sleep studies. So a sleep study will see how much you're breathing or how well you're breathing at night. Oxygen is the number one way we get rid of free radical damage. So when I talk about, I talk about this all the time, but I worked with a cardiothoracic surgeon for a long time before we retired. And right before we retired, I started learning about sleep apnea. So this is like a decade ago. And I asked him, I was like, how big of a problem is this? And he goes, let me put it this way. He said, remember, this is a cardiothoracic surgeon who works on people who have plaque in their arteries and plaque in their heart and that type of thing. And he said, at least half the patients I've worked on, if they didn't have sleep apnea, I would never have met. That's how big of a deal it is. That's why we do sleep studies with all of our studies. Like at the entrance to the exam, like when we do our intake, the executive physical, that's why we do the sleep studies, because so many people have sleep apnea issues, especially now that the vaccine's out, that they just don't know. And it's a massive piece of your healthcare. But again, if you want people to get sick, you don't talk about it. If you want people to get healthy, you do. So you'll understand why the Western medicine guys usually don't talk about sleep studies. But that's kind of where all this stuff goes. So that's why we do echocardiograms. That's why we do calcium CTs. That's why we do sleep studies on everybody when we bring them in. We do our initial intake. But that's the thing. So if you're looking at actually the problem that causes plaquing, you have to look for what's called oxidized LDL. I run that lab. I also run APOB. I run interleukin. There's a lot of things I run that look for inflammation and look for free radical and oxidative damage. When you find those things, you can go back through and clean them up. But like I said, it's all about natural pathways. It's the CoQ10. It's the methylated B vitamins. It's the TUDCA plays a role. Nattokinase, NAC. NAC is fantastic. NAC helps make what's called interstitial glutathione. What that means is that the glutathione that helps the body regenerate, heal, detox, all that type of stuff, it starts making it in the cells so it can fix it. But what happens, the reason that you have plaquing is because you have a pool of oxidative stress, right? You have all these free radicals, and it sits on the blood vessel and it damages the blood vessel. It oxidizes the blood vessel. And then the LDL cholesterol that's flowing through it, if it sits there long enough, it becomes oxidized. So you now have oxidized LDL, and you have an oxidized or damaged epithelial tissue that's in your blood vessel. When these two things get together, they stick, and they're supposed to. And the reason is because oxidative stress can rip apart your blood vessels, and your body's supposed to plaque that over to protect it. Then when you eat your nutrition, it heals it, and you're fine. The problem is that we don't have any nutrition in this country. And so what ends up happening is that if you're not taking your supplementation and you're eating the standard American diet, you just have more and more and more and more free radicals, and it gets worse and worse and worse and plaques up more and more and more. So if this is the first time you're hearing about this, share this video with somebody else, get a calcium CT, get the right labs done, and move everything forward. Now, one of the other fun things is that I've got research that shows that super physiological levels of testosterone, so high levels of testosterone above 1,000, actually eat plaque out of your arteries. So high levels of testosterone, as long as you watch your hemoglobin hematocrit levels, will radically increase your cardiovascular health. One of the other reasons testosterone is also illegal, or has to be by prescription. And they just changed that, so you can't get 3 months anymore. You can only get 1 month at a time. They're trying to crack down on guys like me who are trying to provide healthcare to people, because again, they're starting to be like, whoa, if people get their testosterone levels right, they're not going to need Viagra drugs. They're not going to need antidepressants. They're not going to need bone density drugs. They're going to have sex with their husbands and wives, and their relationships are going to get better. So they don't need, that's another reason they don't need antidepressants and antipsychotics, and so there's a whole list of other drugs you don't need if your testosterone's right. So again, recognize where people make their money. Either you're going to pay to stay healthy or you're going to pay to stay sick. It's your call. But that's kind of where a lot of that stuff is. If you guys are going in and your doctor's telling you need a statin drug, and they're not telling you that you need a calcium CT, and you're not telling you that you need an echocardiogram, again, you don't have a healthcare provider, you have a drug salesman. So if you want a better guy, if you want a better doc, functional medicine guys are usually pretty good at this. But here's the other piece. The guy who reads your labs, the guy who reads your echo, the guy who reads all that stuff matters. There's lots of times where I'll see blood reports and people are like, oh, this person's totally healthy. And I'll look at them and be like, well, they didn't pull the right labs, and they didn't, they're not inferring the right information because they can't, because they don't have the information. Like if you're diabetic and you're seeing somebody for diabetes and they don't pull your insulin every time, again, they're not trying to help you. They're trying to manage your disease and keep you sick. Insulin is the reason that we have diabetes. Insulin, like you got to watch your insulin. Like I'll see people all the time, and I get to tell them that they're diabetic for the first time because their blood sugar will be 100 or 98 or 105, and they're like, "Oh, I was always told my blood sugar is fine." Blood sugar is fine. Your insulin at 25, that's your problem. Fasting blood insulin levels of over 20, you're diabetic. So you've got to start fixing that. Which metabolic specialists, it's easy to fix diabetes. Takes me a couple of days. So it's just, again, one of those things. You're going to pay for healthcare or you're going to pay for sick care. Sick care keeps you sick. That's the Western medicine model. Healthcare keeps you healthy. It's kind of up to you how you guys want to play it. I don't care. People come into the office all the time and they're like, well, I'm going to stay on this path. I'm like, that's cool. You're a sentient adult. You can make your own decisions. My job is to give you the information. Once you have the information, you can choose for yourself. That's just how it goes. So if you guys are worried about your LDL, if you're worried about heart attacks, if you're worried about strokes, get a calcium CT, get an echocardiogram, get a sleep study, and then make sure the guy who's reading them is reading them properly. Get your hormones checked. But again, you've got to get a guy who is focused on keeping you healthy, not focused on keeping you sick. So it's kind of up to you. This is one of the other reasons that Dana White and a lot of people are starting to come out and be like, you should never see a medical doctor for your general health and wellness. So, and I get it. A lot of people can't afford it. This is kind of the concierge thing, but it's kind of up to you. I have people who don't buy the fancier cars so they can keep their body healthier, because this is the machine you get to walk around in. This is what you get to show off. So it's up to you guys how you want to play it, but that would be the big thing. So if your doctor's pushing statin drugs and hasn't been a calcium CT, I would be worried.